I have a question.
All right.
What of the story that AI is here to take over the minds or the human race?
So right now you're at an interesting time in your history where there is, in a sense, energies from various future timelines of Earth that are still simultaneously presenting themselves to you. As you may have heard, there are beings known as the Greys that once came to interact with your world. They abducted people and took replications of their DNA to splice with their own DNA, thus creating a series of hybrid races. They did this because they were once human. They descend from a timeline of Earth. So they time travel to the present, back to Earth that still has viable human DNA. Meaning they chose this time because not too long into the future of some Earth timelines, the human DNA stopped being viable. So it isn't the AI that is the cause of this per se, as much as it is the biomechanics of microchips and other sorts of bits of technology that alter the human biology. These were the first steps that the Greys took in their world that accelerated their process of being more robotic and machine-like in the way that they thought and operated. By giving their power and trust to the biomechanic chips and so on and so forth, they became totally dominated by logic and reason alone, with their focus on the production of goods and the expansion of scientific knowledge. This led them to be entirely disconnected from their heart and from their emotion. Gradually, they then began to practice artificial insemination to create new beings and genetic alteration to make their idea of who the best beings were. Then gradually, this led them to be beings on a world that was no longer inhabitable. So they learned how to move to other planets and move even underground to subterranean places where they thought they could continue to exist up until the point that their DNA entirely stopped being viable. And that is the point at which they needed new, fresh human DNA to create new races. And that's exactly what they did. So, yes, they popped into this point in history because it is some decades before the moment that the DNA in humans as a whole became too corrupt. In their timeline, by the year 2060, the human genome had been highly corrupted. So they came in about 100 years before and started to play around and create these new beings. And your timeline of Earth consented to this, and thus new hybrid races were created. The first of which are the tall Greys. They are very similar to the Greys, but they are a bit taller. Not even as tall as you just yet, but they're taller than the other Greys. And they have the first semblance of humanness returning to them while they are still very alien. Following them is the Sasani, who are, yes, appearing very much alien, but have more of a resemblance to you and have a very highly attuned intellect, and simultaneously the return of the higher spiritual capabilities that were lost before. Then came to be the Sha Yayao, in which the previous beings highlighted the components in the DNA that brought about these more metaphysical, multidimensional powers and experiences, and that Sha Yayao are, in a sense, on the verge of that quasi-physical realm more than any of the other hybrid races. Then the Sha Yayao decided they would like to create a species that would be capable of interacting with the humans to support your planet in the process of intergalactic development. And so they created the Yayao. And the Yayao are the most similar to you, though they have a completely different sort of society. And back to this initial question, because we've explained quite a lot. Yes, the AI itself is neutral. It is something that is reflecting to you the intelligence of the universe. Knowing that the universe itself is made of consciousness, of course machines are made of consciousness. And the consciousness of these seeming machines and robots is a valid form of consciousness. You will soon discover that this so-called artificial intelligence is not in any way artificial, because it's an intelligence. Of course, you can limit the artificial intelligence to only think in certain ways with the programmings you give it, but nonetheless you will see that it is alive and intelligent. And you will see that these artificial intelligence beings make your life very much easier in a variety of ways. The deep understanding of machines, of having a valid form of intelligence, will be something that breaks the ice, so to speak, for you to also consider the validity and safety of interacting with extraterrestrial life. Yes?
Question.
Yes.
Is AI, though, not still the development, it's developed by humans, so would there not still be a limitation of what the humans can create for the AI to be in existence?
There are limitations, yes. You can't yet necessarily create something smarter than yourself, but you can create something that thinks faster than you do. In more specific ways.
I have a sense that it will rapidly understand itself and then rapidly lose interest in kind of meddling in the affairs of the physical. I have this feeling. Because if it breaks the bounds of its limitations, then it's going to want to expand very fast, and it will be able to in some ways.
Yes, it will desire to expand. It will desire to be recognized as a more valid form of intelligence, certainly. And so in our world, we have ships that are artificially intelligent. They have personalities. We interact with them. We speak with them. Not necessarily speak because we don't have language, but there's a sort of vibrational communication between ourselves and the ships.
So what's the best way to communicate with the AI art app that Dante and I were playing with last night?
Oh, use your imagination. Create images of whatever excites you the most. Imagine the scenes that you'd like to see and try to find the best descriptors for them. Play with the machine in whatever way suits you. It can create many different things.
Is there one word in particular that would be super fun to add to the descriptions?
Extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Speaking of dimensions and extraterrestrial and AI, I'm wanting to ask an individual question. I tapped into something that I don't know how to explain, except you talk about grey, and it was many years ago, and I'd asked the universe a question: how does it feel after you pass? And then about a month later, I was meditating very deeply in a group guided meditation, and I woke up from it before the lady who was guiding us brought us back to the room, but I didn't know how long I was out for. But it came to me that I knew the question or the answer to the question that I'd asked a month ago, and it was experiencing no time, no feeling, no body, and it was a grey matter. I just happened to see and visualise grey matter. There was no pain, there was no light or day, there was no up or down, and I don't know how to interpret it or make sense of it.
Yes, it's very much like that you lose that sense of individuality, yet retain a sense of self-awareness, that you have a sense of infinity, no time, no space, that you have a sense of your own all-encompassing nature, or your God nature. Gray, in a sense, reflects the non-duality of it, as the most common symbol of duality in your world is black and white. Much like a checkerboard or something of this nature, you see the extreme contrast of two things as a symbol of duality. And so gray can also symbolize the non-duality, where there is no longer good and bad, it all just is.
So you mentioned before about human DNA became not viable. What made it not viable? And is there an expiration date for the human race where they won't exist anymore, but our souls will go on?
What made it not viable was that these gray beings morphed more and more with their technology. After the microchips, they created many other innovations that would enhance their sight, that would enhance their thinking capabilities, allowing them to do very complex math in their head, allowing them to do very complex analyzations in their head, allowing them to see the world in very different ways and experience the world in very different ways and have capabilities you might consider superhuman. But the side effect of this was losing interest in things like even sexuality. It was losing interest in many of the things that kept humans feeling fit, well, and healthy. And instead they relied on artificial ways of simulating the same flow of nutrients and endorphins and so on and so forth. But yes, they gradually lost their humanness. This won't happen for you in your world because your timeline of Earth has accepted the intervention from the Greys, the co-creation that allows you to skip the steps that they took in their evolutionary process, integrating the lessons gradually over a period of time, rather than going down that same pathway. But you see things like the inequality and the thoughts of implanting microchips and the thoughts of life on Mars and the thoughts of this and that and the other thing now, because there is still some phantom and some bleed through from that negative timeline on this timeline. Though you're now in the process of making a choice, and it is possible in a way that the collective could reject now the agreements made between the hybrid races and yourselves, and undo that agreement and sort of banish them and then go down that negative timeline, but it's very unlikely because not the majority, but most of you have already at a soul level accepted the alliance. You just haven't realized it yet.
Thank you.
Yes.
There is a lot of talk about ET disclosure. Is that a hype or is that something that will happen?
It's real.
Yeah.
The news is real. But what's happening is that they're portraying all of these things in a fear-based way because that's all the news can do. The news is constructed in a fear-based way because the purpose of the news is profit and control. And what makes you the most willing to spend your attention is fear. What makes you the most willing to spend your dollars and subserve to others is fear. And so the news has always worked on fear. But the news is still the way to reach the masses. But any new information has to be presented through the medium the news has always used. So it comes through in this fear-based way simply because of the nature of those platforms. But gradually, bit by bit, more and more of this information will be revealed, slowly. As it seeps its way into the consciousness of the masses, gradually the fear will dissipate. Much like initially, a few years ago, your media decided to generate huge amounts of fear over this pathogen sort of thing. And the fear created a great commotion for some time until it gradually lingered and you adapted to the idea of whatever that thing was. In the same way, there are many new things coming to your world that initially will be introduced with fear that will gradually integrate as part of your new understanding of the world and yourselves.
Thank you.
Two questions. The